That Mother's Day, sunlight poured over the garden I once planted with my calloused hands, now just a stage for someone else to perform fake devotion. My son knelt before his mother-in-law, slipped a $30,000 diamond ring on her finger, and brushed a kiss across her knuckles like a dutiful knight. "For the woman who gave me the perfect wife," he said. Laughter rippled around the table, glasses clinked, and the diamond sparkle flashed like a taunt. "And me, the woman who once sold her wedding ring to pay for my son's schooling, received from my daughter-in-law a cheap plastic mug, the best mom ever decal half peeled off." She smirked. "I hope you still have enough teeth to drink tea." The laughter was thin as a blade, and everyone fell quiet, waiting for my reaction. I smiled. I smiled to hide the moment my heart cracked, when I understood that in this house, a mother's love had been priced at spare change. I set the mug down, opened my phone under the table, and quietly canceled every recurring transfer. They had given me humiliation. I would give them a lesson no one would forget. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Rebecca Hart, 70 years old, founder and former CEO of Heart & Loom Apparel, a small fashion company I built with these hands. 40 years ago, I started with an old sewing machine in my husband's garage, stitching dresses for neighbors to cover the electric bill. Now my only son lives in a 4,000 square foot house I bought for him. The day I handed him the keys, I said, "This is a reward for all your effort." Maybe that was the day I laid the foundation for today's disrespect. The party was held in that very house, my house, though everyone now calls it Lucas and Linda's place. They hired a landscaper, covered the tables with white orchids, and brought in a chef to serve upscale European dishes. I sat at the far end, near the wooden fence where I used to grow lavender, now replaced by Linda with stone statues and fancy patio chairs. Lucas, in a navy suit, took Delilah's, his mother-in-law's, hand and ceremoniously fastened the glittering diamond ring on her finger. The table gasped in unison. Someone said, "Amazing, Lucas. You're the best son-in-law in the world." I looked around. No one noticed me at the end of the table, holding a cup of cold tea. When Linda turned to me, her smile had an icy edge. "Mother Rebecca," she said, syrupy sweet, "I know you like practical things, so I found something perfect for you." She set a pink plastic mug in front of me, price tag still on. "Best mom ever" printed on the side. The table burst into polite, shallow laughter, as if everyone had joined a play I wasn't told about. I picked up the mug, felt the flimsy plastic between my fingers. Linda tilted her head and glanced at me. "Hope you still have enough teeth to drink tea." Her voice was light as a breeze, but loud enough for me to hear, and certainly on purpose. Lucas cleared his throat, pretending not to notice. I smiled, just as they expected, so as not to ruin the party. But something snapped inside my head. Maybe that was the moment I realized everything I'd sacrificed over 70 years, the sleepless nights stitching seam by seam, the times I sold assets to cover my son's debts, the youth I poured into lifting him up, had all been reduced to a pink plastic mug. After the party, Linda saw guests to the door. She said softly to me, still wearing that cool smile, "You should rest, Mother. Don't worry about the company so much. You've done enough. It's time for us to take over." I just nodded. "Yes, I'll rest." She didn't know that as I said it, I opened my phone, scrolled to my banking app, and canceled every recurring transfer I'd set up for Lucas' tuition, insurance, living expenses. One tap, and I took back control of my life. As I left, I heard Delilah praise him. "Lucas, you really are a wonderful man. You know how to move a woman." I walked away in silence, gripping the plastic mug. The sunset lit the lush lawn, the same lawn I used to water every evening. Now everything felt foreign, even the child I gave birth to. That night, I went back to my small apartment in Santa Rosa. It isn't fancy, but it's a place where I can breathe without the suffocation of ingratitude. I set the mug on the table beside a photo of Lucas at 8 wearing a shirt I sewed, grinning wide with 2 missing front teeth. I brushed the picture gently. "You loved me for real back then, didn't you?" I whispered. For a few minutes, tears fell faster than I could wipe them away. Then I told myself, "No, Rebecca. Crying won't buy back respect." I stood, opened the little safe, and took out the company's financial files. Page after page, every expense, every transfer I'd made for Lucas glared back at me like scars. I marked the big ones: $25,000 for a failed restaurant, $18,000 for a luxury car, $7,000 for a Cancun vacation, total over $1 million in 5 years. I didn't feel angry anymore, just empty. But in that emptiness, a thought flashed. It's time to audit everything, not just money, but family. Right as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Mom, I hope you're not upset. Delilah is like a second mother to me. I just wanted to make her happy." I stared at the screen. Second mother. The phrase chilled me. I thought of the years I broke my back, mother, father, housekeeper, bill payer, all in one. No one was his second mother. There was only me, the one who spent her youth making him the man he is today. I didn't reply. I set the phone down, picked up the plastic mug, and turned it in my hands. The sticky label still read, "Made in China." I laughed. How ironic, after a lifetime in apparel, proud of making quality handcrafted goods, the only gift my son gave me was something cheap, with no real sentiment. The next morning, I wrote a list. 9 A.M. Meet the bank. Cancel all Lucas's authorized cards. 10:30 A.M. Meet my longtime attorney, Marion Blake, to revisit the will and company shares. 1 p.m. Call Aaron Patel, CFO, to review the last 5 years of statements. 3 p.m. Review the lease and title for the house Lucas is living in. I wanted to know exactly every dollar I'd given and which dollars had been abused. I made coffee and looked out the window. The California sky was crystal clear, light pouring through white frames. A strange calm settled over me. Not because I'd forgiven, but because I finally knew I would do the right thing. That afternoon, the bank called to confirm all transfers had been canceled. In that moment, it felt like I'd removed a rope that had been cinched around my neck for years. I was no longer the mother of CEO Lucas Hart. I was just Rebecca Hart, a woman who spent a lifetime giving and who, for the first time, was learning to keep a little for herself. I set the plastic mug beside the old photo. "Tomorrow," I murmured, "everything changes." And for the first time in years, I smiled, not to hide the pain, but to welcome the storm on its way. The next morning, as the first light slipped through the white curtains, I sat at my desk with the battered notebook where I'd recorded Hart and Loom's earliest expenses. Every number, every shaky blue ink entry was a piece of me. I looked at my hands, still bearing calluses from those years of needles. These hands once sewed an entire life. They shook now, not from age, but from facing the price of blind love. Children raised by sacrifice who never learned gratitude. I remembered it all. When Lucas was 5, I worked 2 shifts at a textile mill in Fresno, day shifts on the floor, nights studying accounting by mail so I could manage my own books. Some nights I fell asleep at the table, fingers stained with ink and blood where the needle pierced my skin, still doing math in my head, counting every cent saved for the dream. I opened my first shop in my husband's old garage with 3 used industrial machines from a shuttered factory. 6 months later, I had 6 workers. A year later, 12. I remember crying at the table when I signed my first contract with a small retail chain in Oregon, not for the money, but because someone finally believed in what my hands could make. The company grew. 30 workers, then 50, then 200. Heart and loom started to mean something in American handcraft. I picked every fabric myself, checked every seam. Each piece carried my dream big enough to cover Lucas's future. Then, as he grew up, the stitches in our relationship began popping, one by one. The first time Lucas failed, he launched an import sportswear business. I wired $50,000 to help my son get back up. 6 months later, it collapsed. The second time, he invested in an Italian restaurant with friends, and I drew another $30,000 from my retirement. The place closed before its first anniversary. The third time, I can't even remember which year, maybe when Linda was first pregnant. Lucas called, urgent. "Mom, this is a golden opportunity. A tech startup." I knew he didn't understand tech, but I still sent $100,000. 6 months later, the company vanished, leaving a sorry email and a zero balance. Each time he said, "I'll pay you back with interest." And each time I believed because I wanted to. Now I sat in front of my safe and pulled out thick envelopes of invoices and receipts. The German car Lucas bought to impress clients. The Cancun vacation where he and Linda posted sunny beach photos while I was in the hospital for heart tests. The restaurant investment he called a passion for cuisine, all with my signature. I stared at those cold numbers, then at my scarred hands. The sparkle of that $30,000 ring on Delilah's hand felt like a slap to these blood-worn fingers. On one side, diamond shine. On the other, time-worn scars, two worlds that don't touch. I closed the file. Something inside me cracked and lit up at the same time. I no longer felt sorry for myself. I saw a truth. I had raised my son into a rescue addict. I dialed Marion Blake, the attorney who'd handled Hart and Loom's first contracts 30 years ago. "Rebecca?" Marion's voice was steady as ever. "Marion, I need to see you, urgently. I want to change my will and the company structure." He paused, then said, "I'm guessing this is big." "Not bigger than the truth that I turned my son into someone dependent," I said, strangely calm. "I need to rewrite everything, not to punish him, but to teach him the final lesson." We set the meeting for the next morning. Next, I called Aaron Patel, the company's CFO. Aaron's worked with me over a decade, meticulous and loyal. When I told him to shut down all of Lucas's cards and block any personal spending from company accounts, he was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "Are you sure, Mrs. Hart?" "I've never been more sure," I said. "Hart and Loom is my company, not a family credit union. I understand." "But Lucas will learn to live without a credit card his mother pays for." After I hung up, I leaned back and felt a strange lightness. For 40 years, I've been used to carrying everything: the company, the employees, even other people's failures. For the first time, I put something down and the sky didn't fall. That afternoon, I reopened Hart and Loom's balance sheet, lines of numbers: profit, expense, investment. I remembered those nights curled up in the garage, breathing oil and lint, counting every dollar saved. The old lines: expense, thread, revenue, retail chain contract, were the marks of my life. I set today's balance sheet beside it, bloated with Lucas's reckless withdrawals: cars, parties, hollow investments, corporate cards. The gap wasn't just money, it was values. I had become the bank for my own child without noticing. Night fell. I brewed chamomile tea and watched the streetlights flicker on along the boulevard. At 70, I thought I'd learned every lesson life had to offer. Turns out there was one more. Some children don't need more money, they need less of it to grow up. I opened the little notebook where my mother once wrote in black ink, "Never rob someone, especially the child you love, of the chance to stand up on their own." I traced the line like touching my mother's hand. And for the first time, I understood it completely. Near midnight, I opened my laptop and typed the first lines of the new legacy document. The title read, "From Leaving Behind to Teaching." I wrote, "I, Rebecca Hart, decide to redirect the majority of my assets to a fund supporting education and self-reliance training for youth. Because I believe wealth isn't meant to feed dependency, but to kindle the ability to stand on one's own." I paused and looked outside. The California night glittered with tiny stars like tinsel, reminding me of the silver thread I used to edge a client's first wedding dress. Those threads stitched my life together, and now, with these same hands, I would stitch up what was missing in my heart. When I signed the draft, a weight lifted. No more anger, no more heaviness. Just a mother who finally understood that loving a child doesn't mean bailing him out forever. I folded the paper and slid it into an envelope. Outside, the city hummed, streetlights casting a warm glow on an empty road. I sipped my tea, chamomile soft in the air. Tomorrow, Marion would help me finalize it. Tomorrow, I would teach my son the last lesson in the only language he understands: action. 3 days later, I received a thank you card from Delilah Cole Lucas's mother-in-law. The paper smelled of lavender, the handwriting looped like ribbons. "Thank you for raising such a wonderful son, Rebecca. Lucas truly is the gift any mother would dream of." At the bottom she signed in pale gold ink, then added a line, "Your home is lovely. It must be quite costly to keep up." I laughed softly. Delilah always knew how to lace sugar into a jab, like a deft chef hiding bitterness under frosting. She arrives polished, expensive perfume and a gentle smile, but every sentence hides a cold little blade. When we first met, she praised me for keeping in shape at your age, then glanced at Linda and added, "I hope you keep up too, once the skin starts to sag." I didn't react. People like Delilah live by sowing doubt, and Linda, my daughter-in-law, waters those seeds every day. I used to think Linda was just controlling, but she'd built an entire narrative. To outsiders, I was the mother who won't let go, meddling in her son's marriage. Linda told them I want to control everything, won't retire, and pressure Lucas financially. She told Delilah that I called Lucas 3 times a day just to check in, when in truth there was only one text a week. "How are you doing?" Linda told her friends I didn't accept the new daughter-in-law, even though I'm the one who gifted them their wedding house. I watched her performance, the gentle smile, the sympathetic eyes, the lines like, "I'm only worried about Mom," all of it painted a perfectly phony portrait of virtue. And the most eager audience member of that play was Lucas, my son. Lucas has always liked being praised. The boy who once beamed when he was complimented on a shirt I sewed has become a man who survives on his wife's applause. When I offered feedback on financial management, Lucas frowned. "I don't need a lecture every time we meet, Mom." But when Delilah said, "Lucas has a head for business, just like his father," he grinned with proud, childlike delight. For Lucas, compliments are emotional currency more valuable than truth, and Linda knows that better than anyone. One night, I sat at the dining table and opened my phone to reread Linda's messages. They used to look harmless, but seeing them again, I realized how skillfully I'd been manipulated. "Mom, Rebecca, I found a safe car for the baby. What do you think?" "Mom, Rebecca, this imported crib has medical certification. It's worth the money." "Mom, Rebecca, the doctor says prenatal vitamins are very expensive but great for the baby." And every message ended with a bank account number. Not once did she ask, "How are you, Mom? Do you need anything?" Or even a simple, "Thank you." I started printing every message, invoice, and receipt. Each time Linda texted urgent, I marked it in red. After 3 days, the stack was about 1 inch thick. I labeled each group: car, $68,000, vacation, $20,000, baby items, $15,000, jewelry and accessories, $12,000. a total of nearly $125,000 in just the past year. I titled the file, Lucas and Linda, The Status Illusion, because none of those expenses were for survival. They were to maintain an image, the image of a young, successful couple living in a beautiful house, driving a luxury car, with a wealthy, generous mother-in-law. The more I looked, the more I saw they'd legitimize dependency by using my image. In their eyes, I wasn't a person. I was moral capital, a successful, wealthy woman with an obligation to give. Linda once joked at a party, "Mom, Rebecca is wonderful. She always knows how to make everyone feel taken care of." It sounded like praise, but the quick, sideways glance, half mocking, said everything. I understood. They felt no guilt taking money, because, in their minds, I was born to give it away. Instead of getting angry, I chose silence. People say silence is weakness, but I know it can also be preparation. That week, I contacted a private security company. They installed a legal camera system in my home with motion sensors and automatic cloud storage. I had them place a clear sign at the door. "This area is under video surveillance for protection of personal property." No one could sue me for that. I didn't need to spy. I just needed the bare truth records of how they treated me when the social performance was over. In just 2 weeks, what I expected started showing up. Linda stopped by without a single greeting and opened with, "Mom, my car needs maintenance. It's more than we thought." I deliberately answered, "Oh, you still have the company card." She hesitated, then said with a sour edge, "Lucas said you canceled it." "That's right, because that card is mine." Linda looked at me, the smile still on her face but her eyes darker. "So you're going to let your son lose credibility with clients?" "A real man doesn't need an authorized card to have credibility," I said. Her face twisted for a beat before she regained her composure. I knew the camera was rolling. I began gathering evidence. Not to sue, but to prepare for what I was about to do. Emails those lines asking for temporary help. Receipts transfers from the company account to Lucas's personal account. Call logs, short calls, only to ask for money or to have me fix a crisis. I saved everything into a folder named The Plastic Cup Plan. The plastic cup they thought was a joke would become the legal trigger for my entire plan. I started a journal. Not to complain, but to preserve every detail, time, words, feelings. Partly because I needed documentation, partly because I feared forgetting the line between love and self-erasure. On the first page, I wrote, "Love has boundaries," and "that boundary is called respect. If they cross it, they've chosen to lose me." That night, I reread every page, every line, then looked out the window. The city still glowed, but I felt cold. Not from the wind, but from realizing I had lived too long in the shade of fake thank yous. The next day, I received an email from Marion Blake confirming meetings with the attorney and accountant. I replied simply, "I'm ready." Before shutting down, I opened the camera feed and re-watched a clip from yesterday. Linda stood in my living room, sunlight catching the stone on her hand, not a diamond, just glass, but she turned it like a treasure. She said, half scolding, half contemptuous, "Maybe she thinks she's old, so what's the point of keeping money?" I paused the video there. No pain, no anger, just a small smile. Because for the first time, I had the truth in hand, and that truth would be stronger than any excuse. Night fell, and I held the pink plastic cup, now my symbol of carelessness and awakening. The desk lamp shimmered on the thin plastic like a reminder. Real value isn't surface deep. I set the cup beside the status illusion file and told myself, they used my money to build a faux castle. I'll use this truth to bring it down with law, with reason, and with the self-respect they can't buy. Then I sipped my tea, opened my laptop and typed the first line of the formal plan. The plastic cup plan, phase 1, begin with silence. And I knew from that moment on, my fight would no longer be about money, but about reclaiming a mother's worth. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The California sky was still dewy, pale light filtering through the sheer curtain like a thin layer of memory over the room. I brewed black coffee, what I call the morning ritual of someone who doesn't need anyone to make it for her. Today was important, the one-woman shareholders meeting where every decision of my life would pass with a single vote, mine. I put on a gray suit I hadn't worn in ages and the old heels I wore when I signed Hart and Loom's first contract. I smiled at the mirror. Everything began with one woman alone, and today it would be reborn by one woman alone. 8 a.m. I walked into the main bank branch, the place long known as the family's financial headquarters. The young teller stood to greet me. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart. You have an appointment with the branch manager, right?" I nodded. "Yes, and I need to change a few things. Permanently." In the private office, Manager Martinez, who's known me nearly 10 years, offered me a seat. "Is there a problem with your accounts, Mrs. Hart?" "No problem. I just want to reorganize my personal financial system." I slid a printed list across the desk. 1. Cancel all recurring transfers to Lucas's account. 2. Lock all authorized cards and related online banking access. 3. Set up new two-factor authentication only I can authorize with fingerprint. 4. Open a separate account named Mothers Left Behind Fund, temporary. Martinez looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? This is the family account you and your son have used for years." "I know." I cut in gently. "But my family now has only one person who needs protecting me." It took nearly an hour to finish. When I signed the last form, it felt like I'd taken off an old, heavy suit of armor I'd worn for decades. Martinez gave a small smile. "I don't know what's going on, but I think you're doing the right thing." "I think so too," I said evenly. 10 a.m. My meeting with my attorney, Marion Blake, took place on the 15th floor, an old building overlooking Santa Rosa's Central Park. Marion was the same. White hair, plum tie, a warm, steady voice that never wasted words. I set the documents on his desk. "Marion, I need to redo my will and adjust the company's share structure." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing this is about Lucas? Not just about him. It revolves around him." I spoke slowly, clearly. "I want behavioral conditions added for beneficiaries. If Lucas wants to receive any part of my estate, he must meet 3 requirements. 1. No tax debt or bad credit history. 2. Proof of stable employment for at least 12 consecutive months. 3. At least 100 hours of annual volunteer work." Marion sat silent for a few seconds, then chuckled softly. "You've turned your will into a character development program. Better than feeding dependency," I said. "If the law allows, write it plainly. No compliance, no inheritance." He nodded, jotting notes. "And the primary assets? I want to create a Mothers Left Behind fund. The fund will receive 70 to 80% of total assets, including real estate, company shares, and investment returns. Goal: support older women abandoned by family or financially exploited." Marion looked up, eyes warm with respect. "That fund sounds very you." I smiled lightly. "It's the softest part of me and the last thing I want to leave behind." 11:30, I went to the company. CFO Aaron Patel was waiting in a small conference room. I handed him the new list. "This is the loyalty award plan for key employees. Anyone with more than 10 years gets a small equity grant, not cash." Aaron nodded, taking careful notes. I added, "As for Lucas, as of today, I'm revoking the financial power of attorney he held. I'll take care of it immediately. What about invoice approvals?" "Mine, exclusively. We reviewed the insurance policies where Lucas appeared as a beneficiary. I ordered immediate changes. New beneficiaries: Mothers Left Behind Fund, 60%. Key company employees, 30%. Local charities, 10%. I signed. Marion watched a moment, then said quietly, "Rebecca, you're rewriting your legacy literally." I smiled. "Not rewriting, Marion. I'm just giving it back to the people who deserve to write it with me." 1:30 p.m. Back at the main office, I asked Aaron to bring the file on Lucas's house. In truth, the deed is still in my name. I bought it with my personal funds, but out of trust, I let them live there rent-free from day one. Now I wanted to change that not for money, but for fairness. I drafted a new lease, a symbolic amount, just enough to remind them that what they enjoyed didn't appear out of thin air. Marion nodded, a reasonable step. Not to take back, but to remind. "Exactly," I said. "They need to know the value of the roof over their heads." As the afternoon light tilted through the window, my desk held neat stacks. New will, lease, insurance changes, employee awards, charity fund. I gathered everything into a blue binder. On the cover, I wrote by hand, "The Plastic Cup." The name sounds simple, but to me it holds the whole awakening. That pink plastic cup, the cheapest gift I've ever received, became the symbol of a role reversal, from the insulted to the one in charge. 3 p.m. I called Lucas. "Can you come by my office at 4 this afternoon? I want to discuss the baby's budget." His voice lit up immediately. "Of course, Mom. Linda and I were just about to call you about that." "Good. See you at 4. I hung up and inhaled deeply. I hadn't shaken all day, but hearing his voice brought a sharp pinch to my chest. He's still the child I once rocked to sleep with old songs. I reminded myself, "Don't cry, Rebecca. Today isn't for softness. Today is for teaching." I took a blank sheet and drafted the meeting script. 1. Start gently, thank him for coming. 2. Reiterate company finances neutral, no emotion. 3. Present 5-year transfers with specific numbers. 4. Introduce the new lease. 5. Announce changes to the will, bank cards, and beneficiary status. 6. End with 1 line. Starting today, I am no longer the bailout fund. If you want to stand, stand on your own 2 feet. I wrote that sentence in bold and circled it. My handwriting trembled slightly, but my eyes were steady. At 3:45, I straightened the room. My conference space was warm with light, and on the wall hung a black and white photo of Lucas and me on his college graduation day. I looked at it for a long time. Back then, he hugged me and said, "Mom, I'll make you proud." I believed every word. Now, I don't believe, but I still hope. I hope that after today, he'll learn the lesson life hasn't taught him yet. I placed the plastic cup binder in the center of the table, uncapped a pen, and set it beside the file. In the hall, footsteps approached. The receptionist's voice came through. "Mrs. Hart, Lucas is here." I took a deep breath. "Send him in," I said, steady and sure. When the door opened, late afternoon light cut across my son's face. He wore that familiar smile, the one that used to make me forgive anything. Today, I looked at him differently, with the eyes of someone who has stopped feeding illusions. In front of me stood the son I'd rescued 3 times, and now I was ready to let him learn to swim. I gently closed the binder, laying my hand on the cover marked "Plastic Cup." "Sit down, Lucas," I said calmly. "Today we're going to tell the truth, no roles, no excuses." Outside, the sun sank, washing the sky in orange. In the quiet room, I could hear my heartbeat slow, steady, and knew my one-woman shareholders meeting had officially begun. Lucas walked into the conference room at exactly 4 p.m. His white shirt was crisp, still creased from the dry cleaner. I recognized the cut right away, the pricey brand Linda had sent me last month with a message. "Lucas needs a few for meeting clients, can you help?" I said nothing and motioned for him to sit. On the table in front of me was a blue binder labeled "Plastic Cup." Next to it lay a detailed statement of transfers totaling more than $1,027,000 over 5 years. Each number was like a pebble dropped into still water, the sound small, the ripples spreading all the way to my heart. Lucas sat down in the chair across from me, his smile a little stiff. "Mom, I'm glad you're willing to talk. Lately, Linda's been a bit sensitive. I just want everything to be peaceful." "Peaceful," I repeated. "You call taking money every month without asking if I'm okay with it peaceful?" He frowned and leaned back slightly. "Mom, I know you're busy. I didn't want to bother you." I gently opened the binder and set a pink plastic cup in the middle of the table. The light reflected off the glossy surface. The words "Best Mom Ever" were half peeled, like a wound that hadn't healed. "Lucas," I said slowly, "I want to ask you one question. Am I worth on this cup?" Some lines don't need to be shouted to make a heart tremble. What do you think measures a mother's worth? Money, gratitude, or the boundaries she dares to set? I truly want to hear your answer. Please leave a comment. The room went silent. Lucas looked at the cup, then at me, as if trying to figure out whether this was a metaphor or a rebuke. "Mom, that day was just a misunderstanding. Linda didn't mean anything by it. That cup was a gift we'd bought earlier. Stop," I cut in, still calm. "I don't need excuses for the gift. I want to talk about what it means." I turned the cup toward him, then opened the binder and flipped through the pages. "Here's a list of what I've done over the past 5 years. $50,000 for the sports company you started and then went bankrupt. $30,000 for the Italian restaurant you called your passion. $100,000 for the tech project that never materialized. $68,000 for the German car to serve clients. $20,000 for the Cancun vacation. $15,000 for baby items that never became a baby. $12,000 for jewelry, a small gift for Linda. Total, $1,025,000, and you gave me a plastic cup." My voice didn't shake, but my throat was dry. Lucas lowered his head, his hands clenched into fists. "Mom, I know I was wrong," he said, voice hoarse. "But you don't understand. Things are really hard right now. I just want to give Linda a better life." I held back a sigh. "A better life doesn't come from spending other people's money, Lucas." He looked up, a hint of desperation in his eyes. "Mom, Delilah doesn't judge me. She says everyone has tough phases. Why can't you think like she does?" I pressed my lips together and looked straight at him. "Because she's not the one paying your bills." Lucas said nothing. The air in the room thickened. I could hear the clock on the wall counting every second. "You don't get it," he finally said, voice low. "I'm about to be a father. I have responsibilities. Linda needs safety. I need stability." I leaned back, fingers interlaced. "Responsibilities?" I repeated, each word clear. "Responsibility doesn't start in my wallet. It starts with your own 2 hands." Lucas bit his lip, his eyes starting to redden. "Mom, I'm not asking for much. Just a few months. When things get better, You say that once a year, every year for 10 years. I cut in. I've heard it enough. I pulled the first sheet from the binder and slid it toward him. "This is the account statement. I've ended all recurring transfers. Your authorized card has been canceled. Your financial access to the company has been revoked. Your name has also been removed from the life insurance. Starting today, there is no more Rebecca Hart Bank." He stared at me like he couldn't believe his ears. "Mom, you really did that?" "Yes. Everything was signed and legally confirmed this morning." Lucas shot to his feet, his voice cracking. "I can't believe you'd treat me like this. I'm your only son." I stayed seated. "And I'm the only person who stood by you for 40 years, even when everyone else walked away. You can't demand unconditional love forever." He began pacing the room. "Linda's pregnant, Mom. Do you know what that means?" "I do," I said lightly. "It means you're about to be a father. And a father doesn't use that as a reason to ask his mother for money." Lucas stopped, his shoulders trembling. I just want you to believe in me." I looked at him for a long time. Believe. I've believed in you more than I believed in myself, Lucas. I believed enough to sell my wedding ring so you could go to college. I believed enough to co-sign your debt after your first failure. But trust can't go on forever if only one person is carrying it. He was silent. No argument, no apology, just a bowed head. Late afternoon light came through the window, laying a band of gold across his dark hair, and I saw the little boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after his first day of school. My heart ached, but it wasn't the old, weak ache. It was a wound that needed to heal. I opened the drawer, took out a white envelope, and slid it to him. "This is a conditional restitution agreement." Lucas looked up, fear and doubt mixed in his eyes. "You can call it a recovery plan if you want. If you truly want to prove you're worthy, read it carefully and sign, but I won't force you." He took the envelope with shaky hands. "What is it?" "A document laying out exactly how you can rebuild my trust and your inheritance rights? Are you trying to control me down to every breath?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm setting boundaries. An adult can't live without boundaries, Lucas." He stared at the envelope like it was something foreign. I stood and walked to the window. The sunset was slipping off the building across the way, leaving one last ribbon of light on the floor. "You know," I said quietly, "when I started my business, someone asked, 'Rebecca, do you work for money or for family?' I said I worked for love because I wanted you to have the best. Turns out, love without limits kills its own value." I turned back to him. "Today I'm not taking anything from you. I'm putting you back where you belong on your own 2 feet." He still didn't speak. I knew anger, shame, and fear were fighting inside him. Finally, Lucas whispered, voice tight, "Do you really believe I can change?" I nodded. If I didn't, I wouldn't have bothered preparing that agreement. But change doesn't start with words. It starts when you're willing to face yourself. I picked up the plastic cup again and turned it in my hand. "See this cup?" I asked. "It's cheap, but it still exists. Like me looked down on, but I'm still here, standing. The point is, I'm no longer letting anyone drink from it without paying a price." Lucas took a deep breath, his eyes conflicted. "I'll read the agreement. But I need time." "Good," I said. "I'm not in a hurry. Any lesson worth learning needs time to sink in." I set the cup back on the table, square and neat, like a stamp closing our conversation. "You can go now, and take that envelope with you. Don't let it sit in the car like an unpaid bill." He nodded and stood slowly. At the door, he turned, eyes wet. "Mom, do you still love me?" I smiled, soft as a breath. "A mother's love never ends, Lucas. But starting today, it no longer includes money." The door closed, leaving the room with the smell of cold coffee and fading sunset. I sat and looked at the plastic cup on the table. It was still there, cheap but durable, and in that moment I knew a mother's worth isn't measured by gifts, but by the boundaries she dares to set. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar line, Santa Rosa Memorial ER. I paused. An instinct that once saved me in risky deals kicked in again. I answered, "Mrs. Hart, we're calling from the emergency room. Patient Delilah Cole was brought in at 7:42 p.m. after a car collision. Your name is listed as the emergency contact." I was silent for a few seconds, thinking I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say? Why me?" The nurse answered evenly, "Miss Cole doesn't have family nearby, and your number is in her insurance file." I pressed my hand to my forehead as a wave of fatigue spread across my shoulders. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again, Lucas. I picked up. His voice was awkward. "Mom, I'm sorry. Linda's home with bad morning sickness, and I had to go to a meeting, so I used your name as the primary contact. You're more available, and you're closer to the hospital." I let out a dry laugh despite the bitter taste. Available and closed, so that's why I get tied into the lives of people who look down on me. Fine, I said coolly. I'll go. The hospital was bright with white lights. I walked through the antiseptic hall and saw Delilah on a bed, leg in a cast, shoulder bandaged. Same, face light makeup, pale lipstick, pride intact. She looked at me, briefly flustered, then slipped back into her usual poise. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. My car was hit at an intersection. Thankfully, it's just a minor fracture. I pulled up a chair. It's fine. They called because my name is on the file. She gave a small, stiff smile. Lucas or Linda must have filled it in wrong. They're a bit casual. I looked at her. Yes, they're very casual, sometimes with other people's money. Delilah, and looked away as if she hadn't heard. She changed the subject to the weather, then said, Rebecca, I really appreciate you coming. Lucas says you're always willing to help. Not everyone has a heart like that. I answered quietly. Hearts have limits too, Delilah, just like bank accounts. About an hour later, the doctor cleared her for discharge. I helped Delilah to the car, though she tried to refuse. No need, I can call a taxi. Don't worry, I said evenly. I bought this car myself, so at least let me use it properly. She flinched slightly. When the door closed, the silence grew uncomfortable. Streetlights slid across her face, each beam tracing deeper lines of pride. I broke the silence. Delilah, I have a question. That $30,000 diamond ring Lucas gave you on Mother's Day, and the Caribbean cruise voucher for your birthday last month, do you know who paid for those? She turned, brow faintly furrowed. Lucas gave them to me. He said it was a bonus from the company. I smirked. A bonus? Interesting. I opened my phone, pulled up the plastic cup folder, and showed the screenshots. May 5th, $30,000 to DeLune Jewelers. June 19th, $12,400 to Royal Caribbean Limited. I held the screen up. Do these dates ring a bell? Delilah went quiet. The blue light reflected in her eyes. Her face went a shade paler. I didn't know, she said softly. I didn't think. I know. I cut in. You didn't think, you just enjoyed. She gripped the edge of her gown, voice trembling. Rebecca, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was your money. I assumed that my son was successful and generous, right? That I was the mother willingly backing him, and that it was a given? Delilah lowered her head. Her voice turned raspy. I was wrong to enable it. I saw your generosity and thought, it was endless. I looked out the window as the light streaked past the trees. Nothing is endless, Delilah. Not money, and certainly not kindness. I pulled over and faced her. You once taught Linda that a woman should marry someone who can take care of her, didn't you? She nodded slightly. Then today, I want you to ask your daughter what she herself has taken care of in the life she's enjoying. Delilah pressed her lips together and stayed quiet. For a few seconds, she stared at her hands, the ones that had worn that sparkling ring she now seemed unable to look at. I opened my contacts, called Lucas, and put it on speaker. Lucas, I said when he picked up, I'm sitting with your mother-in-law. He hesitated on the other end. Mom, why are you two? I handed the phone to Delilah. She has something to ask. Delilah looked at me, then took the phone. Her voice was low and clear. Lucas, I just want to know one thing. The ring you gave me, where did the money come from? Silence on the line. A hiss of air. I thought the call had dropped, then heard Lucas's rough voice. Mom, don't misunderstand. I don't need excuses, Delilah said, sharper than I'd ever heard her. I asked, where did the money come from? Silence. Then a deep breath. From Mom Rebecca. She closed her eyes, as if the answer confirmed what she feared most. I understand, she said, and handed the phone back. I kept it brief. Lucas, I'm not going to argue. I just want you to know everything has changed. Learn to live on your own effort." All I heard was his quick breathing. Then the call ended. Immediately after, my phone buzzed non-stop texts from Linda. "Mom, my card isn't working. Transaction declined. I need money urgently. The baby needs vitamins. Could you transfer just $2,000 to me? Did you see my messages?" 4 texts in under 2 minutes. I showed them to Delilah. She exhaled and said slowly, "Linda doesn't know how to stop." I raised her, believing things would always be handled, that someone would always step in. "Exactly like Lucas," I said. Delilah leaned back, staring straight ahead. "Maybe I need to talk to my daughter. I can't let her become a version of me." We rode in silence the rest of the way. At her house, she opened the door carefully, then turned back to me. "Rebecca," she said softly, "you have every right to be angry, but I hope you won't hate us. We're mothers after all." I looked at her for a long moment. A breeze lifted the silver strands on her forehead. "No, I don't hate anyone, Delilah. I'm just revoking the priority pass they've used for too long." She gave a sad smile and squeezed my hand. "I'll talk to my daughter. It's time the kids learn to earn, not just to spend." I nodded. "Good. Because starting today, easy money is over." On the drive home, I cracked the window and let the cold night air sweep through my hair. The city glittered like a river of broken gold, and yet I felt strangely clear. There was no sense of victory, just a quiet calm. The peace of someone who finally cleaned a room she'd been afraid to enter. I knew this fight wasn't over. Lucas and Linda would react, justify, try to negotiate. But tonight, I had something they couldn't buy with all the money they'd ever asked for: peace of mind. And at 70, I realized sometimes the strongest thing a mother can do isn't to give, but to stop giving. By the time I pulled in, it was late. The street outside the gate was damp with dew, the streetlight a dusty gold across memories no one wanted to touch. I had barely turned off the engine when I saw Lucas waiting at the door, hands in his pockets, tired but still wearing that crisp shirt. I wasn't surprised. A man pampered his whole life never lets the ending be, "The money's gone." "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk again? I'm just asking for a delay. Give me more time to sort things out." I didn't answer right away. I walked past him, unlocked the door, then turned back. "Lucas, I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm just repeating what I said. Everything has boundaries. When you cross them, you deal with the consequences." He sighed, gripping the doorframe. "Are you pushing me out of your life?" I was calm. "No, I'm inviting you to step out of my wallet." Lucas lowered his head, silent. Looking at my son, I suddenly saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, the fear of living without a rescuer. Before I could close the door, Linda appeared. She hurried up, face flushed, eyes brimming. "You're cruel!" She burst into tears. "Do you want our family to fall apart?" "Lucas lost his job. I'm pregnant. And you cut the money like we're not even your family." I stayed quiet and let her vent. Linda's voice climbed higher, every word laced with wounded pride. "You call yourself a good mother, a good grandmother? No one treats their family like this. The whole town will know how stingy you are." I looked at her, no anger, no pity. Then I picked up the small remote on the table and turned on the living room TV. The first clip rolled, Linda in the kitchen, talking on the phone. "Mom, Rebecca, this crib is on sale today. If you transfer the money soon, I can place the order." The second, "Mom, Lucas's car maintenance cost an extra $1,200. Could you transfer it? I'll pay you back at the end of the month." The third, "Mom, this Cancun trip is a chance for Lucas to close a new deal. Don't be cheap, I guarantee it'll pay off." Her voice rang out clearly, every syllable crisp. When the videos ended, the room felt vacuumed of air. "Those are 3 of 12 times you called to ask for money in 8 months, I said evenly, not counting the texts. Linda's mouth fell open, eyes wide. Lucas turned to his wife, face pale. You recorded us?" Linda's voice shook. "No, the security cameras did," I said. "There's a warning sign on the door. Everything is fully legal." Right then, Tessa Nguyen, my 16-year-old niece whom I've raised since she was little, stepped out of the hallway holding a stack of printouts. "I'm sorry to cut in, but Grandma asked me to print these message threads," Tessa said softly, setting the pile on the table. Linda stared. "Who is this girl?" "Tessa," I said. "My niece, my sister's daughter. She grew up in this house on scholarships, not a dime from me." Tessa calmly opened the first page. "These are the texts you sent Mrs. Rebecca over the last year. 46 in total. 39 include the phrase, 'Could you transfer?'" Silence settled over the room. Lucas looked down, lips trembling. For the first time, he had to face reality not through his wife's telling, but through evidence. Tessa went on. "I once heard my mom say kindness only means something when the recipient is grateful. If they turn it into an entitlement, it isn't kindness anymore." Linda ground her teeth. "This kid doesn't understand anything. We're just going through a rough patch." I cut in. "Hard times don't give anyone the right to turn another person into a walking wallet." I pulled an envelope and set it on the table between the three of us. "These are the 3 conditions. I'm not forcing you to sign, but if you truly want to earn back trust, read them carefully." Lucas looked up. "3 conditions?" I nodded. 1. Live, for 1 year without my money. No transfers, no authorized cards, no co-signing. 2. Treat me like a person, not a sponsor. 3. Apologize publicly. Not to praise me, but so you learn to take responsibility. I looked straight into Lucas's eyes. "If you do all 3, I'll reopen the will and share equity again. If not, I'll consider myself childless." Linda shot to her feet, face flushed. "Who do you think you are to set conditions like that? We don't need your money anymore." "Fine, we'll move out. We'll go live with my mother where no one humiliates us like this." I stayed seated, voice light as air. "Even better, be independent, Linda. That's step 1 in learning to be an adult." She choked, then tugged at Lucas's arm. "Let's go." But Lucas didn't move. He looked at me, conflicted. "Mom, I don't want it to end like this." "It isn't ending, Lucas," I said softly. "It's starting over the right way." When they left the house, I took the keys from the drawer and locked the home I'd bought for them. I wasn't angry anymore. Every feeling had hardened into a thick, steady calm. I set the new lease on the table and signed my name, Rebecca Hart, owner. I added a small line at the bottom, effective the day you learn the word independence. I slipped a copy into an envelope and sent it to my attorney, Marion Blake. That evening, Tessa brought me a cup of chamomile tea. She sat beside me and asked quietly, "Are you sad?" I smiled. "Of course. But sadness doesn't mean regret. Some doors need to close so the wind stops blowing straight into your heart." Tessa nodded. "You know, when I watched those videos of Miss Linda asking for money, I thought of my mom. She used to say, 'Never turn love into debt.'" I set my hand on her shoulder. "And you just reminded me of that lesson too." We sat in silence, listening to the clock tick. I looked around the house now. Just 2 women, 2 generations, sharing one thing: self-respect. Before bed, I went into my office, opened a drawer, and took out the pink plastic cup. Best mom ever had faded, but it didn't hurt anymore. I set it neatly on the desk beside the lease and the plastic cup binder. It would stay there as a reminder of my worth, not measured in money, but in the right to say no. I turned off the lights and walked to my bedroom. The door clicked softly behind me. For the first time in years, I didn't need a nightlight. No fear of a morning call for money, no dread of urgent texts. I lay down and listened to my heartbeat steady. Outside the window, the night breeze slipped by like a late lullaby. And as my eyelids grew heavy, I smiled because at last After 70 years, I'd learned how to sleep peacefully in my own home. 3 days later, before the sun rose over the Santa Rosa Hills, I was in my office with a new binder on the desk, its title in bold, 3 Conditions for Restitution. I reread every line I'd written, tightening each sentence so it was clear: no bitterness, but no room for confusion. This wasn't a sentence, it was a guide back to decency. I scheduled Lucas and Linda for Monday morning. They arrived on time, maybe to prove they were serious. Lucas was neatly dressed but looked tired. For the first time, Linda came without makeup. They sat without speaking. I slid the binder toward them. These are the conditions I mentioned. I want you to read them carefully, not like a contract, but like an ethical commitment. Lucas opened to the first page, eyes skimming the bold lines. Condition 1. Within 12 months from the date of signing, Lucas and Linda may not receive any financial support from me or from Heart and Loom. No transfers, no authorized cards, no short-term loans, no co-signing. If you violate this even once, the agreement becomes permanently void. I looked at them and spoke slowly. This isn't because I'm stingy, but because I need to know whether you can live without leaning on me. It's the first test 12 months of growing up. Linda frowned. Do you know how hard life is right now? Rent, insurance, hospital. I do. I cut in. I lived through days of canned noodles and tap water, but I didn't call anyone for money. You can do the same. Lucas squeezed his wife's hand, voice smaller. Mom, if we try and it's still not enough, then you learn to cut what you don't need, I said. Fewer fancy meals, fewer trips, less showing off. Being broke isn't shameful. Pretending you're not is. Condition 2. Act like real family. Call to check on me at least twice a month, not to ask for money. Invite me to important occasions, birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or any family milestone. If there's conflict, handle it with respect, not blame. I looked up straight at Lucas. I don't need flowers or gifts just to be remembered as a person, not an ATM. Lucas nodded slowly, eyes starting to redden. Linda stayed quiet, lips pressed tight, but her gaze had softened. I went on. I lost my husband early and devoted my life to raising you. If you can't call just to ask, "How are you, Mom?" then no matter how much I leave you, you're still poor. Condition 3. Apologize publicly in front of the family, especially to me and Lila Cole, for abusing trust and finances. No tears required, just honesty. If the apology is made and respect is maintained for at least 1 year, I will consider restoring a portion of the inheritance, but never 100%. Because the harm happened, and the only thing that can't fully return is trust. I closed the packet, voice slow but firm. These 3 aren't punishments. They're the only door back. If you pass through, I'll reopen part of the estate, but I'll never go back to the way it was. The past taught me the most expensive lesson. Love without limits is self-destruction. Lucas sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up the pen and signed. His hand shook, the ink smudged a corner, but the signature was clear enough to stand. Linda looked down at the page, then at her husband. She hesitated, didn't want to sign, but didn't dare walk out. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I need time to think." "That's fine," I said. "You can take a lifetime to think. But this agreement only takes effect when both of you sign." Linda bit her lip, then exhaled hard. She signed messy, never meeting my eyes. I set another packet on the table. "This is the lease. The house you live in is in my name, but starting this month, you'll be legal tenants. Rent is market rate, not higher, not lower. Everything is due on time. No priority, no exceptions." Lucas stared at the paper. "Do you really want to turn us into strangers?" I shook my head. "No. I want you to become normal people. People who pay for what they use." I held out the keys but kept the paper. "When you pay the first month, I'll hand over the keys officially." Lucas nodded, voice hoarse. I understand. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that looked like understanding. A week later, the Mothers Left Behind Fund officially launched. I held an internal meeting at Heart and Loom, no fanfare, just a warm morning with longtime staff. I stood at the podium and looked at the faces that had weathered so many storms with me, women who'd worked night shifts, brought cold rice to the sewing floor, cried when they were laid off, then came back when we recovered. This fund, I said, isn't just named for mothers left behind, it's to protect their dignity. No one deserves to be treated as a burden just because she's grown old. Applause rose. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. I announced, starting this year, 10% of Heart and Loom's net profit will go to the fund for the first 2 years. We don't just stitch clothes, we stitch torn lives. Tessa stood beside me in a white shirt. She asked to be the first volunteer. Grandma, I want to help women like you once were, she said, eyes bright. I smoothed her hair and smiled. You won't just help them, Tessa. You'll be my eyes and heart, seeing what I can't anymore, feeling what I once forgot. That afternoon we tidied the office. Tessa pinned our new logo on the wall, Mothers Left Behind Where Strength Has No Age. Below it, I placed the pink plastic cup on the shelf. It sat there quietly in a wash of golden sunlight. Something once cheap had become a symbol of rebirth, mine, the company's, and of every woman who'd been dismissed. By evening, I sat in the garden when my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Mom, we reread the agreement. We'll try to keep our word. I know I was wrong. Another line. A few minutes later. Linda's not saying much yet, but she's out looking for a job. I'll send the rent on time. I set the phone down and nodded slightly. It wasn't their remorse that eased me, but the sign of growing up. Maybe he didn't fully understand, but at least he'd started walking. I looked at the twilight deepening, the breeze stirring the lavender rose I once planted with calloused hands. Now they draped the steps, faintly fragrant like a belief stitched back together. I'm not hoping for Lucas to kneel and apologize, nor for Linda to sob in my arms. I just hope that someday, when they face the mirror in the morning, they'll see the people who raised them, not with money, but with endurance. I leaned back and closed my eyes. In the soft wind, I could almost hear Frank, my late husband, whisper somewhere, "You did the right thing, Rebecca. It's time to let them walk." I smiled, peaceful. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't forgiving others, it's stopping the payments for their mistakes. The first 2 months of the agreement were chaos. People used to being rescued will always test where the new boundary is. Lucas did exactly that. Week 1. He called at midnight. Voice raspy. Mom, I paid the rent late just 2 days. Can you transfer something for now? I'll pay you back next month. I replied with 2 words. No. No explanation. No. Softening. Week 2, another call. Mom, Linda had an allergic reaction. The doctor says she needs imported meds. I don't have enough. The hospital takes insurance, I said, and hung up. Week 3, texts poured in. The crib sale ends today. Help me a little so I can order. I set my phone down, finished my chamomile tea, and deleted the message. No reply. In the second month, Linda showed up at my door. She didn't scream like before. She pleaded, trying to sound calm. Rebecca, I understand you're upset, but you're making everything harder. We're expecting a baby. You're the grandmother, you should help. I stayed quiet. Before I could answer, Tessa stepped out from the study and stood beside me. Miss Linda, she said, gentle but steady, my grandma and I agreed on boundaries. Please don't cross them. Linda glared. Who do you think you are to lecture me? Tessa smiled. I'm only reminding you of what you promised. Her words made me ache and glow with pride at once. I set a hand on my granddaughter's shoulder and said, Tessa, go back inside. Then to Linda, I don't hate you, Linda. But love means nothing if it's treated as an obligation. You came today to ask for money. I won't open this door a second time. Linda stood frozen, eyes wet, but I didn't waver. She left without a word. I shut the door, leaned against the wall, and took a long breath. Inside, my heart still twinged. Saying no to someone who once called you Mom is never easy. But every time I weakened, I remembered that Mother's Day night when a plastic cup was set before me like a joke. And I reminded myself, there are no more rescue funds. I poured all my energy into the Mothers Left Behind Fund. Our first case arrived. Mrs. Mercedes Franklin, 72, pressured by her son into signing her house away. When I met her, she wore a faded gray dress, hands shaking but voice still warm. My son said I'm old, and I don't know anything about legal stuff. I laughed, signed just to make him happy, and lost my house. Hearing her story, my chest tightened. A picture of myself from a few months ago flashed back, another mother treated as if she'd outlived her role. But Mrs. Mercedes wasn't angry. She simply said, "Thank goodness for your fund. I don't need the house back, just a place to read and make tea." I held her hand and saw in her eyes something Lucas had lost. Dignity in the middle of hardship. That afternoon, when Mrs. Mercedes received her first support check, I stood by the window and watched the sunlight spill into the yard. For the first time in months, I felt truly useful. No one at the company asked about my family, but I could feel a different kind of respect. They no longer saw me as a soft-hearted mom or a boss who only knew kindness. They saw I kept boundaries, and that gave my words weight again. An old employee, Maribel, told me during a break, "Mrs. Hart, I used to think you were too nice." Now I get it, being kind without limits is digging your own grave. I smiled. Exactly. It's never too late to teach people to respect you. In the evenings, Tessa and I went through the list of cases to help. She took notes. I reviewed files. I realized that even in my 70s, I was still learning not to control, just to take responsibility for my part. I no longer chased after people to save them. I gave them tools to stand up on their own, just like I'd forced Lucas to do. In mid-March, I got a handwritten letter. The paper smelled of lavender, the script slanted. "Rebecca, I owe you a thank you. I reviewed all the evidence and understand I helped make my daughter dependent. I will teach Linda again, not with money, but with gratitude." Delilah Cole. When I finished reading, I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Maybe Delilah and I learned the same lesson, the lesson of mothers who thought they were helping, but were actually harming. In April, Lucas called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mom, could you help me with a little startup money?" "I promise I'll pay it back." I smiled and gave one answer. No. No anger, no blame, no explanation. I hung up and made tea with Tessa. Then Linda sent an email, the tone softer. "If you won't help, at least let me borrow your name to get a loan." I hit delete. For the first time, my hand didn't shake when I said no. In May, Linda showed up outside Heart and Loom. I was about to get in the car when I saw her walking up, belly bigger now, eyes puffy. "Rebecca, do you really feel no guilt?" "Guilt?" I echoed. "For leaving your son to struggle when you clearly can help?" I looked at her and spoke slowly. "Linda, I used to think helping meant giving money. Now I know helping means teaching people not to need me. You and Lucas need that more than anything." She said nothing and turned away. Her back looked small in the sun. I didn't feel satisfied, just a thin thread of sadness, snapped, and no longer worth tying. I still love my son. I love him quietly, not with money. Every night I still open my phone and look at photos of Lucas as a child, messy hair, chocolate on his lips, eyes full of hope. I whisper, "My boy, I'm not abandoning you. I'm waiting for you to come back on your own two hands." Some nights I still wrestle with it, but strangely, I don't wake in a panic anymore. No more emergency calls, no more pleading emails. The house is quiet but not lonely. Tessa often laughs. Grandma sleeps like someone who just paid off all her debts, I answer, because that's exactly what happened. At the end of June, as sunset washed the yard in pale orange, my phone rang. I hesitated when I saw Lucas's name but picked up. His voice was deeper and calmer. Mom, I want to take you to lunch. No money talk, I promise. I paused. Part of me stayed guarded. Another part trembled, a mix of joy and fear. Where? I asked. The old place you like by the river. Noon tomorrow. I heard him take a deep breath on the other end, like he was fighting to keep his promise. I smiled slightly. Okay, I'll be there. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights float up into the dark sky. 6 months without a rescue fund, 6 months of tears, anger, and swallowing my impulses, but also the first 6 months of my life not letting anyone take my power. I poured more tea, watched the steam rise, and thought about tomorrow's lunch. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew this. If a hand reached out this time, it would be to hold, not to take. The restaurant Lucas picked tucked up against a small river, the same spot with the old wooden table where we used to sit on his birthdays. I remembered the smell of toasted bread and laughter from those poor but peaceful years. Now I sat again with the son who once broke my heart, not in a fancy place, but a modest diner with plastic chairs and recycled napkins. Lucas arrived early. He stood when I walked in, thinner, sun-browned. For the first time in years, his eyes were clear, honest, and steady. I called because I wanted to talk, not to ask, he said, pulling out my chair. Don't worry, I'm paying today. I glanced around. The hand-painted menu board read, Soup of the day, $8.99, grilled chicken, $12.50. I nodded and smiled. Then I'm at ease. Lucas ordered 2 grilled chickens and waters. No wine, no pricey coffee, no bragging. When the server left, he sat quietly for a moment and then spoke slowly. I sold the German car. I'm driving a coworker's old pickup now. I stayed quiet and waited. We also moved to a smaller apartment on the east side. Linda's teaching part-time at a language school, and I'm picking up weekend shifts at the warehouse. It's tiring, but it feels real. For the first time, I know what it's like to earn what I spend. I looked at his hand, slightly rougher now, a bit of sundark on his thumb. Time really does teach in ways parents can't buy. He lowered his head, voice smaller. I used to treat you like a talking ATM. I'm ashamed when I think about it. Now I feel like I'm finally becoming a real man. I didn't interrupt. Sometimes a mother's silence is the only mirror clear enough for a child to see himself. Lucas lifted a small baby girl from the bassinet beside him. I froze, surprised. Mom, this is Mia, he said hoarsely. Our daughter. She opened her eyes and grabbed my finger with that tiny hand. The feeling, both strange and familiar, sent a soft current through my heart. Lucas went on, eyes drifting. I think, if someday Mia treated me the way I treated you, I couldn't bear it. He paused, voice shaking. I'm sorry, Mom. Not for the money, for making you feel meaningless in the home you built. I looked at my son and softened. I didn't cry, the tears for anger dried long ago, but I felt something thaw inside. I touched his hand lightly. You don't need to say more, Lucas. I'm not erasing the conditions, but I see, maybe you're on the right path. We ate in quiet. The clink of cutlery, a breeze off the river rattling the roof. The air wasn't awkward, just calm, like 2 people catching their breath after a storm. Lucas looked up and asked, Mom, what can I do to make it right? I set down my fork and met his eyes. Some debts can't be paid with money. Live decently, consistently, work hard, be good to your wife and child, and never borrow the name of family to ask for pity. That's enough. He nodded, eyes wet but clear. I'll remember. Suddenly the door opened. A familiar figure stepped in, Lila Cole. Elegant as ever, beige coat, neat bun, but today her face was gentler. Rebecca, she said softly, Lucas told me you two were having lunch. I don't want to intrude, but there's something I need to return. She set a small velvet box on the table and opened it, the $30,000 diamond ring. Light scattered off the stone, but this time it wasn't showy, it felt like restitution. I want you to take it back, Delilah said slowly, because that gift wasn't clean. It was bought with your money, not my son's. Lucas lowered his head and closed his eyes. I looked at the ring, then at Delilah. Thank you for the gesture, I said quietly. But I don't need anything back. If you'd like, donate it to the Mothers Left Behind Fund. It'll mean more there. Delilah smiled this time with her eyes, not a practiced face. Then I will, she said. Thank you for teaching me and my daughter that kindness doesn't include the right to take. Lucas looked up and whispered, Thank you, Mom, Delilah. She set a hand on his shoulder. Live in a way that honors the mother who brought you into this world. Her words shook me. For a brief moment, the three of us, three mothers in different ways, finally met in the same place. Understanding. When Delilah left, only the wind remained. Lucas rocked Mia gently. I looked at father and daughter and saw a familiar yet new scene. The once dependent son holding what's truly his. I stood and said, This lunch wasn't cheap, Lucas. Not because of the price, because it held the most valuable things. The courage to apologize and the resolve not to repeat. He stood and hugged me. A real hug, the first in years. No tears, no promises, just warmth. I heard my son's heartbeat, steady, and in that moment, I knew I'd walked the necessary stretch of pain to arrive here. That afternoon, I went home and opened the worn leather journal on my desk, my wake-up diary. I wrote, Forgiveness isn't wiping a debt, it's closing the old ledger so you can write a new page. Today my son laid the first brick on his way back. I don't know how far he'll go, but I know I've stopped being the headwind. Forgiveness is a two-way street, and today we both walked halfway. I shut the journal and looked out at the garden. Evening light fell on the lavender Tessa and I planted. In that glow, the pink plastic cup on my desk caught the light, not a symbol of humiliation anymore, but a clean start. I smiled and said to myself, My lesson ends here. But our life is just beginning again. 1 year after that lunch, with the lavender blooming through another season, I realized the most miraculous thing about time. It doesn't heal by magic. It heals through small, steady actions. Exactly what I'd told Lucas. That day, my son completed all 3 conditions. No more calls for money, no financial emergencies. Instead, real calls, Mom, I just got a temporary promotion, or Mom, I'm making soup this weekend, come over. Linda changed too. No more pleading emails, now she sent photos from school fundraisers, a small table, a sign reading, Bake sale for single moms, and a bright smile without a mask. On the evening of the 1-year mark, the whole family gathered in the living room. Not the fancy house downtown, but the old place in Santa Rosa where I rebuilt my boundaries. Linda stood first, hands shaking a little but voice clear. Rebecca and family. I want to apologize not just for what I said, but for believing love could be exploited. I forgot that someone's kindness isn't an obligation. Thank you for not giving up on us, even though you had every reason to. No one clapped. A soft quiet spread through the room, not awkward, but accepting. Lucas slipped an arm around her shoulders. In his eyes I saw what I'd longed to see for years, the light of a man who'd finally grown up. A few days later I met with my attorney, Marion Blake. We sat at the old wooden table where I'd signed so many contracts this time. A new will. I pointed to each clause. 60% of my assets and Heart and Loom shares will go to the Mothers Left Behind Fund. The remaining 40% will be split among Lucas, Tessa, and the key employees who've stood with me for more than 3 decades. But I added one condition. Before receiving their shares, Everyone must complete the family finance course run by the fund and undergo an independent audit to prove they can manage money responsibly. Marion smiled. You still don't fully trust anyone, do you? It's not about mistrust, I said. I trust discipline more than kindness. Then I called Lucas to the office. He sat across from me, steady in a simple shirt and an old watch he said meant he'd stopped chasing brands. Lucas, I said, I want you on the fund's advisory council. Unpaid seat, 12-month term. You don't need to do something big, just listen and learn. He blinked. Unpaid? I laughed. If you only work for money, you're not ready for that table. He chuckled and nodded. I get it. I'll do it. Linda later picked up a role in community fundraising. She organized free classes for single moms using her language skills to connect them with donors. I didn't say much. I watched. But inside, I knew she'd redirected her energy from demanding to giving. The biggest surprise was Delilah Cole. She called me on a Monday morning, sounding energized. Rebecca, I want to help. I left my school job, but I can speak, and I want to say what matters. A few weeks later, she became the fund's community ambassador. Her first talk was titled, Praise Doesn't Replace Responsibility. On stage, she spoke about the gap between flattering kids and actually raising them. I used to think praise was love, she said, but I learned praise doesn't prevent mistakes, only responsibility does. The audience stood and applauded. I sat in the front row watching her, and strangely, I felt we'd become allies. At Heart and Loom, I rolled out a family no special privileges policy. No one is allowed to use company funds for personal expenses. Every invoice goes through an external audit. A few employees felt constrained at first, but after just a few months the results were clear. Cleaner costs, better productivity, and most importantly, a culture of accountability spreading through the place. At the all-hands meeting, I said, transparency doesn't kill humanity, it protects it from becoming a tool. Everyone stood and applauded. I knew that was when the company truly grew up, not just in revenue, but in ethics. Tessa, my little niece, won a full scholarship to med school this year. I remember the night we got the news. She burst into my office, waving the acceptance letter, shouting, Grandma, I did it! I hugged her, and the tears just came. I'm so proud of you, I said. But remember, stay humble. Knowledge without compassion is just a sharp knife. Tessa nodded, eyes shining like a small lamp. I'll remember, Grandma, and I'll be a doctor not to make money, but to help people like Mrs. Mercedes. Hearing that, I knew the seed of kindness had sprouted in the right direction. A few months later, Lucas and I visited mothers supported by the fund. We went to see Mrs. Carolyn, an 80-year-old who lives alone with 2 cats. Lucas listened while she talked about the years her son disappeared, no letters, no calls. She smiled sadly. Now I just want to know he's alive. That's enough. I looked at Lucas, his eyes were red. On the drive back, he stayed quiet a long time, then said, Mom, I get it now. Turns out this pain isn't just ours. You didn't just save yourself, you saved me from becoming that kind of person. I put a hand on his shoulder. No one is born knowing how to be a parent or a child. We only learn sometimes by losing. He nodded and squeezed my hand. Lightly. No promises needed. Just real presence. When we got home, I opened the financial files and glanced over the fund's dashboard. More than 100 women helped, 13 fully reintegrated cases, 7 homes bought back with low-interest loans. Numbers don't tell everything, but I know each one is a story of survival. I leaned back and looked out the window. The lavender still bloomed, but now there were other hands tending it. Lucas's, Linda's, the very people who once hurt me most now helping me replant this garden. That night I wrote the final line in my journal. I once mistook legacy for money. Now I understand. True legacy is the ability to stand after you fall, and the way we teach others to respect the limits of love. I'm ready to reopen my heart, but I will never again reopen a faucet of unconditional money. I closed the journal and set down the pen. Outside, the night breeze stirred the purple lavender, its scent drifting through the house, and I knew our family, after so much wreckage, had finally been rebuilt. 2 years later, Mother's Day arrived with the warm smell of coffee filling the kitchen and soft laughter floating from the living room. I woke to morning sunlight through the curtains and heard Tessa call, "Grandma, get up, someone's making cappuccino worse than you do." I laughed. Stepping out of my room, I saw a scene I hadn't dared to dream of 2 years earlier. Lucas at the stove stirring coffee, sleeves rolled, and beside him, Linda helping Mia now sprinkle crumbs over heart-shaped cookies. At the table, Delilah arranged a fruit platter, hair grayer, face calm and kind. The house brimmed with voices and laughter. No old tension, no wary glances, just warmth. Lucas came over and took my hand. "Mom, I didn't buy anything expensive today, but I think you'll like this more." He handed me a small box wrapped in plain craft paper. I opened it, a simple silver ring with a tiny engraving inside, "For the woman who taught us dignity." I looked at the ring, and a strange feeling rose, not pride, not sentimentality, but a deep, quiet peace. It cost under $200, yet it was the most valuable gift of my life, because for the first time in years, it was paid for with the truth, not obligation. Linda set a blue album on the table. On the cover, in Tessa's handwriting, "Rebecca, the hands that built a home." I opened it, each page a journey. A photo of me in the first sewing shop with 6 workers and an old clattering fan. The first contract signed with a small Dallas chain, my handwriting shaky but sure. A picture of my simple dinner with Lucas during his college years, just instant noodles, but his eyes were so bright. Then handwritten notes from workers. "Because of you, I have a home." A letter from Tessa. "You taught me that love isn't sacrificing everything, but keeping enough of yourself to keep loving." Finally, photos of the grandmothers from the Mothers Left Behind Fund, their faces lit by the warm glow of group meetings. I turned each page, the soft rustle sounding like the heartbeat of time. Lucas stood beside me, arm around Linda, and read aloud a paragraph he wrote. "Mom, I hurt you because I thought love could be taken without limit. Now I understand, limits are what make love last. I promise the final years of your life will be your happiest, not with money, but with presence." I squeezed his hand. "I don't need you to make up for anything. Just remember, love with discipline is love that's real." Linda wiped her eyes and nodded. "I've learned that, Rebecca, and I want to teach it to Mia." On the wooden shelf where I once put that pink plastic cup, there's a new frame. Inside are the cup and the silver ring, side by side. I looked at them. 2 gifts, one from a dark past, one from a clear present, together in a single frame, from humiliation to education, from tears to freedom. That is the full cycle of a mother who learned to stop at the right time. That afternoon, I went upstairs, opened my computer, and signed the final update to my will. Heart and Loom now has 2 official operators, Lucas and Tessa. The Mothers Left Behind Fund is set to receive a fixed percentage of annual profits, untouchable and unsellable. I no longer hold absolute power, and that is real freedom. My legacy is no longer in a safe, it's in how those after me choose to live. That evening, while the family gathered around the table, Mia ran over and grabbed my hand. "Grandma, is your ring on yet?" I bent down and let her slide the silver ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if measured by memory. I closed the blue album and looked at the final words on the cover. Plastic cup, 2 simple words holding a lifetime of learning how to keep dignity inside love. I exhaled, relieved. The circle was complete. As dusk fell over the lavender garden, I sat by the window and watched the family below, Lucas laughing with Tessa, Linda steadying little Mia as she picked flowers. Their laughter drifted into the breeze, warm enough to thaw my heart. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Frank, do you see it? This house has truly come home. And now, if you listening to me have lived through similar wounds, I hope my story gives you a little peace." Love and boundaries can coexist. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live lighter. If you've been a parent, been hurt, or learned to stand after betrayal, leave me a comment, tell me where you're from, or what helped you find your strength. And if you believe stories like this still need to be told, please like, subscribe, and stay for the journeys ahead. I'm grateful you're here listening, empathizing, and joining me in proving it's never too late to begin again stronger and kinder.